Hello friends, I warmly welcome you on my Zaltech channel. Friends, you might be know that Flutter is a very well development web framework which is developed by Google, and now onwards Android also supported Flutter to develop web applications and plus mobile applications development. So if you want to learn Android, then this is the chance for you. You have to start with Flutter and Dart because it's a developing community to develop web applications or mobile application, or morely on Flutter and Dart is on mobile application. If you want to start, then there might be chances that you have some questions in your mind. What is Flutter? About Dart language, what is Dart, and why we have to use Flutter for mobile development? What is the features will be provided by Flutter? You might be want to know about it. And after onwards, we are going to starting development of Flutter with installation of Flutter plugins. Let's first of all get some knowledge of Flutter and Dart. I just created one documentation for you. You can see here I have some documentation overview on Flutter and Dart. As you can see here about Flutter and Dart introduction, I providing what is a Flutter. Then search. If you want to start with Flutter, then first of all you have to know what is Flutter. Then you can see here Flutter is an open source SDK for creating high performance, high federation mobile application for iOS and Android. You might be know that the Flutter is useful for developing Android application as well as iOS application. You do not have to learn JavaScript, Java, Kotlin or Swift differently. You can use it on Flutter. By developing just Flutter applications, you can use on both devices, iOS and Android, and you will also feel powerful and productive with Flutter's functionality, reactive framework, and our extremely fast hot reload methods. If you don't know what is hot reload, if you are previously running on Android Studio, then you might be know that in Android SDK we also have a hot reload, but it's not working on every time. You have to restart your application or rebuild your application, but Flutter is supporting this situation. Is going to give a fast hot reload. If you just changing the values and data of your variables, then hot reload is very useful when you are developing some long projects. On emulator, you will write your Flutter app in Dart. If you might be know that Flutter is only using Dart programming language. What is Dart programming language? Who develop it? Let's learn first of all what is Dart programming language. Dart programming language is dosto a client optimized programming language for fast app on multiple platforms. As you might be know that Java is a multi-platform application development programming language, as well as Dart is also developed by Google. As you can see here, Dart is developed by Google and used to build mobile, desktop, backend and web application. As you can might be know that Java is also used for this kind of references, and that much powerful language is a Dart. Dart is also a programming language like object-oriented language supporting backend supports, desktop application supports, all will be provided by Dart. And Dart is as you can see here object-oriented language and class-defined language. And Dart also have a support like Java of garbage collection of language. You also can use Dart language as your programming language in daily routine because it's so powerful as a Java language. Let's we have an introduction of Flutter and Dart. Let's get started with Flutter and Dart introduction about mobile application. Why should we use this Flutter and Dart for mobile app development? First of all, Google plan to replace Android with Flutter. As you might be know that in next 5 years Android will be replaced with Flutter. Then you have to learn Flutter first of all. Flutter will support only in C and C++, Go, Dart and the Rust programming language. You here can see that the Google plan is not supporting Kotlin or Java. If you are developing web applications or any kind of application using Kotlin and Java, then you might have to transfer from there to this programming language. So if you want to start from some basic environments, then just start with Flutter and Dart for web application or mobile application development. Let's get ahead. Today, Android is the killing application for Kotlin because it is a welcome upgrade for developers that had to use dated Java version otherwise. As you can see here, as we know that the Java version are improving in their programming languages. That's why we have to learn each time the Java programming language to learn the web development. But C and C++, Go and Dart, they are just well developed programming languages which are developed by Google, so you do not have to do anything on that. Java is still version developed, so you have to maintain the versions of Java, but in Go, Dart and Rust, they have their own builds if you want to develop it. Friends, I also want to say you, if you want to Dart compiler, then you can just go and write Dart lang. No, you have to just write dark pad and you go to console of Dart. Let's just take you to there. Just write here Dart pad. As you can see here, this first link, just go to this Dart pad. As you can see here, you get a console of Dart pad. You can run your console programming Dart programming here without any compilation. You can see here, if we have any error here, then the errors will be displayed here, and if you run it, then these errors will also produced here. So if you want to learn Dart language, then you can use this Dartpad, which also developed by Google. Let's move ahead. This is the main reason why we are using Flutter over Android development. What are the features which Flutter providing for development over Android development? Let's get some basic overview. Let's compare Flutter with native Android development by using some criteria. Let's take a chance on technical architecture. Although Flutter and Android are being developed at Google, the technical architecture of the both is completely different. Yes, you might be know that Flutter is working on Dart programming language, while the native Android development was used Java and Kotlin, which are version developed. If you want to use some different versions of Java and Kotlin, you have to use that plugin in your development. But in Dart, there is no version development, so you can use it differently or effectively in your programming language. Let's get started on some second environment variable, developer productivity. As you might be know that in Android engineers have to use Android Studio, or they might be use Virtual Studio Code, but most of the Android developers using Android Studio and native build and platform tools provided by Android Studio. Android Studio have all the SDK tools embedded within the IDE. These tools also need emulators and virtual devices to run this application. But what happens every time, friends? Every time developers make changes to the app, they have to rebuild the application. But in Flutter, they provided some hot reload. As you can see here, there is a hot reload option. When developer make any changes to their code variables, then they do not have to rebuild that application as like in Android Engineering Studio. But in Flutter, you just have to use hot reload so that you can run faster and develop faster your applications. Friends, UI components and testing supports we will see in our next video tutorials lectures. Those friends, UI components means as we are going to use text views, images, videos, that kind of components are known as UI components, user interface components. And testing supports means as we are going to use this application on virtual devices, Android emulators, we are going to give some test cases on that, like text, we are going to enter some text, and that kind of situation is known as testing support via virtual environment devices. And I also want to include this CI and CD support, means continuous integration and continuous delivery practice allow for fast delivery of Android application. That's the overview of friends of Flutter and Dart, and why are we going to use Flutter and what is the advantages of Flutter. There is one more advantage of Flutter and Dart environment using, which I want to share with you. Let's get started. When friends first Flutter and Dart is not available, we are using JavaScript frameworks for our development. With JavaScript framework, we required some bridge, and that bridge is known as web view, which is required to transfer JavaScript framework from Android SDK understanding framework. So these many steps we will require. First of all, we require Java framework like React.js and that kind of, and at the end of Android Studio we have Android SDK. But to transfer from JavaScript framework to a bridge, to Android SDK, we required some bridge, some web view, but in Flutter and Dart, we do not require this. We just have to require only two things. Control V. As you might be know, JavaScript framework of React.js is also useful for developing web applications and mobile applications via this bridge to Android SDK. But because of use of Flutter framework, which is also developed using JavaScript, if you are going to use this Flutter framework, you do not require this bridge. All the application is directly converted from JavaScript framework Flutter to the Android SDK. So the time being to transfer from JavaScript framework to the Android SDK using this web view will be reduced in part, so that you can develop your application faster than you thought. Thank you dosto, thank you for watching this video. This video is all about just Flutter and Dart introduction and why you have to use Flutter and Dart, and the future is a Flutter and Dart. If you want to start Android development or web mobile application development, then please go with Flutter and Dart, because it provides some inbuilt feature of transferring that application, mobile application, with Android and iOS. But previously you have to use Swift to develop iOS and Kotlin or Java to develop Android. But using Flutter and Dart, you can run your application on both iOS and Android. So that if you learn what is Flutter and how Dart is useful and why we have to use Flutter, then please give like to my video. And if you want to see my next video tutorials on Flutter, then please subscribe my channel over here. Thank you dosto, thank you for watching this video.